Here we are at the 4th episode of NFL Coaster Concepts, and today we break down the NFC West. If you want to watch some of the previous episodes, I'll link the playlist above. If you don't know by now, I love Steel Curtain, the Pittsburgh Steelers themed roller coaster at Kennywood, and that's what inspired this series. If you're a fan of the Seattle Seahawks, San Francisco 49ers, LA Rams, or Arizona Cardinals, buckle up, because it's time for some coaster concepts on Coaster Jawn. Per usual, let's go over the criteria for coaster concepts: team and player nicknames, team colors, where the nearest theme park is to a team city, the best fit for the park, who the park is working with, and what model best fits the theme. We start episode 4 in the Great Northwest and their Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks nicknames typically refer to their rowdy fan base, often referred to as the 12th man. The 12th man has an advantage over other fan bases as their stadium, formerly known as CenturyLink Field, now Lumen Field, has a special design which is rumored to amplify the sounds from the stands onto the field. Regardless, it creates an obnoxiously loud playing environment, which has been referred to as the Legion of Boom. The Legion of Boom was also the nickname of their defense in the 2010s, but grew to encompass the whole organization. So if you somehow didn't pick up on it by now, this coaster would be called Legion of Boom, and I think the ideal model for it would be an RMC of some kind at Wild Waves Theme and Water Park. Wild Waves is really the only somewhat major amusement park in the Seattle area and is only about 30 minutes away from the Seahawks Stadium, so it pretty much has to go there. I think there are two main possibilities, the first of which is an RMC Raptor, which I think is very likely for a small park like this. We've already seen a park in Wildwater West in South Dakota with plans to build an RMC Raptor, and Silverwood is getting one as well, which is not far from Rocky Mountain Construction's headquarters in Idaho. Move one state over to Washington and Wild Waves has an opportunity for a cheap thrill machine. Their other option, if they decide to splurge with RMC, could be to transform their rough wooden coaster Timberhawk Ride of Prey into a glossy, smooth hybrid coaster. I think the Raptor model is much more likely, but I feel like a full-fledged RMC hybrid would be a much better representation of the Legion of Boom. Either way, Wild Waves could really use an elite thrill machine. Heading down the Pacific Coast, we have the San Francisco 49ers. One nickname that the 49ers have been called are the Bay Bombers. I'm not sure when this nickname came to fruition, and I know that it's also the name of a roller derby team in San Francisco, but I still think that Bay Bomber is a good name for this coaster. It would be fitting if Bay Bomber was built at California's Great America, which is quite literally right across the street from Levi's Stadium where the Niners play. I could have gone with another Niners nickname, Gold Rush, but to me that's too similar to Gold Striker, the GCI wooden coaster at Great America. Lots of people think that this park is due for a B&M Hyper, and I agree, it is. But to me, what this park is also lacking is a launch coaster. So I think that a mock multi-launch coaster like Copperhead Strike at Carowinds is a perfect fit here. I also think this could be a good replacement for their outdated Aerolooper Demon. Bay Bomber would be a great modern addition to California's Great America, as Cedar Fair continues to make it into a premier West Coast park. Down to Southern California we go, to Los Angeles and their LA Rams. Since there are now 2 NFL teams in LA, I figured each team should get their own park, so I designated the Rams to have Six Flags Magic Mountain and the Chargers to Knott's Berry Farm. One of the Rams' iconic nicknames has been the Greatest Show on Turf, which referred to their record-breaking offense in the late 90s and early 2000s. So I think a good adaptation of that name would be the Greatest Coaster on Turf. Since the Rams have Magic Mountain, I figured a good fit for that park would be a replacement hypercoaster for Goliath, which they would theoretically tear down to build this. Given that Six Flags is close with S&S, they could go big at their flagship park and build an S&S hypercoaster like Steel Curtain. I don't think it would be a clone of it, but rather an adaptation that focuses more on airtime and less on inversions. Greatest Show on Turf would definitely be an improvement over Goliath and would work well in Magic Mountain's lineup. Last but not least are the Arizona Cardinals. As I mentioned with the Panthers in the last episode, lots of teams have had nicknames with the word cardiac in it, like the Cardiac Cards for example. So with the Cardinals, I also avoided the issue of heart disease for this one. Another prominent nickname for the Cardinals refers to their fans in the stadium as the Red Sea, but I avoided that one for religious purposes. With limited nicknames to work with, the best I could come up with was Card Coaster, since the Cardinals are often referred to as the Cards. Phoenix is another major city like Seattle and New Orleans, which lacks a major amusement park, but the closest thing to it is Castles and Coasters, which is only only about 20 to 30 minutes away from State Farm Stadium where the Cardinals play. Castles and Coasters, a park which hasn't had a new coaster since a pair of Hopkins coasters were added, both in 1992, would likely have a very small budget. I think a reasonably cheap addition for the park would either be an SNS 40 free spin or an SBF Visa Big Air. Both of these coasters are smaller additions with tiny footprints, but still provide out-of-control spinning sensations. SBF Visa almost strictly sticks to smaller parks, and their Big Air model with that spinning hamster wheel would fit right in at Castles and Coasters. That same logic applies to SNS, who has shown that they'll work with smaller parks, like with Dragon Slayer at Adventureland. Either way, Card Coaster will provide a thrilling and disorienting experience for guests without breaking Castles and Coasters' bank. And there you have it. The NFC West coaster concepts are Legion of Boom at Wild Waves, Bay Bomber at California's Great America, Greatest Coaster on Turf at Six Flags Magic Mountain, and Card Coaster at Castles and Coasters. So what did you think of these coaster concepts? Were there any theme parks or coaster models which would make more sense? Leave a comment down below whether you agreed or disagreed with my choices. And of course, subscribe to Coaster Jawn to help me keep making these videos. Tune in next time as we move on to the AFC teams. Until then, you know what to do. Ride on.